parties. The defendant is present, seated, the jury is present, and Detective Johnson has returned to the witness stand. Good afternoon. And so, ladies and gentlemen, for no taking, we have that Detective Hamilton return to the witness stand. Do you understand that you are still under oath?
Yes, I do.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. You may continue with your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Detective Hamilton.
Good afternoon.
I think one of the areas we left off a couple of days ago when you were on this last on the witness stand, you testified that you had gone on Saturday with the SRT, or Special Response Team, the Criminal Investigation Division, part of the Crime Reduction Unit, to the area of Wailuku Bay to conduct a further search on Saturday, February 15th. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you also testified what type of clothing you were wearing during that search. You recall that as well?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So let's start from there. What kind of clothing were? Can you just tell us what kind of clothing?
Yes, black boots, blue BDU pants, and a black sweatshirt.
And pursuant to the search, you also testified a couple of days ago that at some point you did get down on your hands and knees. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And could you describe what, if anything, happened with your clothing as you got down on your hands and knees?
The pants, as I was crawling through that area, became saturated with the material that was on the ground.
And when you say the material on the ground, what are you referring to?
The muddy area that also had the smell of decomposition.
And with respect to that pair of pants you're using on that day to assist in the search, what did you do with that?
I ended up having to throw them away.
Now, I think you also testified upon being questioned by the state that you assisted in conducting a search of the defendant. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And again, just referring to your testimony, that was on February 27, 2014.
That is correct.
And at the time you folks conducted a search at the defendant's residence in his room, do you recall whether it was still daylight outside or was it dark?
It was dark.
Yeah, I'm sure counsel through my trial pad was been marked as Case Exhibits 380 and 381. I'll get you now. Yeah, at this time, may I approach Detective Hamilton with Case Exhibits 380 and 381, marked for identification.
You may do so.
Okay, Detective, I'm showing you Exhibits 380 and 381, which has been marked for identification. Please take a look at that and I'll have further questions. Do you recognize both of those photographs in 380 and 381 for identification?
Yes, I do.
And what are they?
They're the pictures of Steven's room.
Now, was there, when you folks conducted the search, was there do you recall whether or not there was a person in charge of the photographing of that search?
I believe it was Evidence Specialist Anthony Earls.
And do you recall him being there?
Yes, I do.
And do these pictures actually reflect the defendant's room back on December 27th, 2014, when you folks conducted a search.
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, have they been changed or altered in any way?
No, they haven't.
Your Honor, this time the state would move into evidence state's exhibits 380 and 381, which have been marked for identification.
Mr. Akmo. Or,
Is there any chance we can approach her?
yeah, you may do so. State's Exhibits 380 and 381 marked for identification purposes.
Thank you, Your Honor. You have permission to publish both exhibits which have been received,
Permission granted.
and permission for Detective Hamilton to step down and motion.
You may do so.
Hey, Detective, if you could make sure you stand to the right side of the monitor so everyone can see it. Turning your attention to State's Exhibit 380. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
This is a view of Steven's room from the door looking in.
And particularly on the floor, can you describe articles that you know on the floor there?
A pair of jeans right here, some paper towels, plates, dog food, dog bowl, articles of clothing.
And is that how it appeared when you entered into the defendant's room back on February 27, 2014?
Yes, it was.
Now, with respect to the blue jeans that you see on the floor right there, did you handle those jeans in any manner?
No, I didn't.
And did you, well, if you didn't handle the jeans, did you take a closer look at the jeans other than what you see in the photograph here?
No, I did not.
And turning your attention to I'm going to enlarge and one more question with respect to the jeans. When you saw this pair of blue jeans there, were they on the floor in this manner when you saw it?
Yes, they were.
As far as you know, were they handled? Did you observe them being handled by any member of the search team?
No.
Next, showing you State's Exhibit 381, asking if you identify that.
Yes, this is a view from the corner from the previous picture, looking back towards the door for the room would be on this side over here, and this is a view towards the closet.
And did you note anything on the bed within the defendant's room?
Yes, there's a cell phone on the bed, looks like an iPhone with not in a case, and in the closet area, just the lack of clothing in this room.
Thank you. You can go ahead and have a seat. Okay, the address of the defendant's residence that you conducted the search with, do you remember what the address is?
I believe it was 225 Kalipo Place
And where is that located?
in Haiku.
Now, Detective, did you make any arrests pursuant to your investigation in this case?
Yes, I did.
And what arrest was that?
The defendant was arrested for this case on July 14th, 2014.
Now, after the defendant had been arrested for this case, did you have an occasion to interview a person by the name of Jeffrey Ellis?
Yes, I did.
And where did that take place?
That took place at the Wailuku Police Station.
Now, without telling us what was said during that interview, after that interview with Jeffrey Ellis, what, if anything, did you do?
We conducted a second or another search of the Nuailua area under the Culvert Bridge.
And when you say we conducted a search, who are you referring to?
I think it was myself, and I believe Lieutenant Dodge was there.
And what?
Proceed.
And pursuant to the search, what, if anything, was noticed or recovered?
Nothing was noticed or recovered.
Couple more questions, John. Your Honor, this time the state would ask permission to publish State's Exhibit 22 and 23, which are already in evidence.
Proceed, permission granted.
You can sit there, Detective. I'm going to show you what's in evidence as State's Exhibit 22, asking if you recognize it.
Yes.
When you conducted the arrest, or made the arrest on the defendant back in July of 2014, how did he appear to you? Or, okay, just looking at a photograph that's shown in Exhibit 22, did the defendant appear like this?
I'll check Mr. Owens.
I'm going to overrule the objection in light of some of the other testimony presented during the course of the trial.
I'll check his leading.
You know, this one is foundational. There's no other way to ask it like showing the photograph.
The objection is overruled.
You can answer the question.
I mean, that wasn't the picture from the arrest.
Right, but my question to you, did he appear like this as in this photograph?
Objection has an answer.
The objection is overruled.
I don't remember if he had a beard or not at that time.
Okay. And showing you State's Exhibit 23, just, do you recall the defendant's, his body size or body type when you arrested him back in July of 2011?
I'll check his lack of foundation.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
Approximately, I mean, he appeared like that. I mean, he was skinny.
Right, when defendant was arrested, did he appear, as far as his body size or body type, did he appear differently or similar to the photograph that you're seeing in
Similar.
Exhibit 23? Similar?
Similar.
Yeah, I have no further questions.
Mr. Cross-examination.
Detective, may I ask that if you don't understand the question that I ask you, that you let me know and I can re-ask it.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to ask some questions about your role in the investigation. I guess, just to clarify, at some point during the investigation, were you designated the primary investigator or not?
There was no official takeover of the case. It just I took a more active role in the investigation, as Detective Lee took less of an active role in it.
And just to put that in context, in terms of being a primary investigator, would it be accurate to say that a primary investigator would be assigned for, among other reasons, to make sure that someone is ultimately accountable for that investigation?
Well, they're assigned to investigate the case.
And in that regard, that person would be accountable for a full and fair investigation.
Well, they'll be accountable for what they do.
Well, I guess my point is this, or my question would be this. Would it be fair to say that as a primary investigator, well, actually, let me work up to that. would it be accurate to say that the role of a primary investigator would be to conduct a full and fair investigation?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that a role of any investigator taking part in an investigation would be to provide a fair and full and fair investigation?
Yes.
And would it be accurate to say that a full and fair investigation includes compiling evidence that proves that a suspect is guilty of an allegation?
Yes.
And it would also include the elimination of suspects, if that's where the evidence goes?
Yes.
And more particularly, in a case like this, would it be accurate to say that a full and fair investigation would include an investigation not subject to tampering?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I do object, that is vague and ambiguous.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
In terms of conducting a full and fair investigation, would it be accurate to say that a primary investigator's role would be to investigate whether whether the evidence collected has been subject to tampering, for example?
I'm sorry, are you asking if the primary investigator should oversee every piece of evidence that's brought in?
Well, we'll start there, sure.
No, there's no way a primary investigator can be there for every time that a piece of evidence is brought in.
Okay, so if a piece of evidence is brought in, for example, in a case like this, who ultimately is accountable for that piece of evidence?
Judge, objection that draws a conclusion is also a requirement that somebody be held accountable. It's an argument.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
Well, let me ask you this. In an investigation, let's say in the context of collection of DNA evidence, would you agree with me that contamination would be an issue in terms of an investigation?
Objection, Your Honor, that's broad, vague, and ambiguous.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
When you're conducting an investigation, for example, one that deals with DNA, would it be accurate to say that a primary investigator would be responsible to make sure that evidence collected has not been subject to tampering?
And again, objection that assumes a responsibility that's speculative.
I'll overrule the objection. You may answer the question.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Would it be fair to say that in a case, for example, with DNA evidence, that as a primary investigator, one of your roles would be to address any issues of contamination to make sure there hasn't been any or whether there has been any?
Judge, again, objection, that's a different question, but that question is vague and ambiguous, the way it's asked.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
Okay, I'm not sure what you're trying to ask.
You know what contamination is in a crime scene?
Yes.
For example, in a crime scene with potential DNA, what other potential contamination issues?
I'm not sure what you're trying to ask.
Are you aware of any kind of contamination issues, potential contamination issues at a DNA scene?
Yes, yeah, if someone handles it without any gloves on.
Okay, so that would be one potential example. Are there any other potential issues that you would be looking at as a primary investigator at such a crime scene?
It'd be the handling of the evidence.
Anything else?
I'm not sure what you're trying to ask.
Okay. Would you agree with me that contamination of evidence can happen inadvertently?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that it can happen deliberately?
Yes.
For example, the planting of evidence?
Judge, objection, if this calls for speculation, that's argumentative at this point.
In terms of fleshing out what type of deliberate contamination issues there may be,
Anything's possible, Judge, that's why this is speculation.
this is foundational.
I'll overrule the objection for the time being.
Are you asking if it's possible that evidence can be planted?
I mean, in terms of addressing any kind of issues of contamination, particularly deliberate contamination, you agree with me that planting of evidence would be one form of
That would be a form.
that issue, right?
Yes.
Any other forms of deliberate contamination that you can think of?
I mean, everything's going to be different. I mean, each scene is different.
Now, you'd agree with me that even inadvertent contamination could play a significant role in an investigation, for example, of DNA evidence, right?
It's possible.
It could spoil, for example, good incriminating evidence, right?
You could.
It could spoil, for example, fingerprints or DNA, right?
That depends.
But on the other end of things, it could deprive innocent people.
Judge, objection, this is argumentative. There's no way.
There's nothing argumentative
This is
about
purely
it.
argumentative.
This is
The
a speaking
objection is-
objection.
The court's ready to rule. The objection is sustained.
It's foundational in terms of the purpose for
The court
investigation.
has ruled.
Would you agree with me that one possible issue that contamination of, for example, DNA evidence may raise is that it could deprive
Objection, Your Honor.
accurate testing, which could possibly exclude people based on that testing?
Let me have you close approach, please. Thank you. you may ask your next question.
Well, let me ask you this. As a primary investigator, does a full and fair investigation ever purposely ignore real suspects in order to focus on one desired suspect?
There's objection, that's an argument right there.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
I don't know, what's argumentative about that?
Number one is argumentative. Number two, it doesn't relate to anything the witness is testifying to on direct. It's
In
beyond
terms
the
of his
scope
list of suspects, his 10 list of suspects?
It goes beyond the scope of direct examination.
Your Honor, he testified on direct about a list of 10 suspects.
And counsel objected to going into that list, and now he wants to go into it.
Your Honor, maybe approach.
No, let's push forward, please. All right?
No, the thing is, Your Honor,
Please, all right?
well, your testimony was that you had investigated some 10 suspects other than Steven Capobianco in this case. Is that accurate?
Objection, he didn't list them as suspects, or all of them as suspects.
Suspects are persons of interest. Is that accurate?
The question is withdrawn. Let's ask the question again.
Your testimony, if I'm not mistaken, was that you had some list of 10 people who were suspects or people of interest. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Now, would it be accurate, I mean, is it fair to say, well, let me ask you this. Does a full and fair investigation ever purposely ignore real suspects in order to focus on one desired
Judge,
suspect?
that's the exact same question, it's argumentative,
And
it goes beyond.
I'm going to sustain the objection. I don't have any questions that any problem with questions that relate to the direct examination of the witness, but this is a very broad and general rolling discussion of investigations which will allow both sides to get into a long discussion about good and bad investigations, and the court's view respectfully that is going to be counterproductive. But if you want to ask specific questions about his direct testimony, I don't have problems with that as long as the questions are proper.
Well, you came up with a list of people, for example, that included the Francos, Alton, Alfred, and Derek, right?
Yes.
And you talked about some other people like Taylor Farner, right?
Yes.
And Taylor Farner, would you describe as a person of interest or a suspect?
She was a person of interest.
And why was she a person of interest?
No, I do object because now we're going into hearsay information as well as the content, which was objected to earlier.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain the objection. I think this opens a door that's going to allow both the defense and the prosecution to get into a discussion that's going to contain considerable hearsay about why certain decisions were made. It's going to be based almost exclusively on hearsay evidence. I don't think it's appropriate for the court to allow that door to open. Once it opens, this witness is going to be asked to explain why certain people were eliminated, why others were not. Unless this witness has some direct knowledge or was present at the time of these events, which I don't believe this witness has, it's going to be all hearsay. And I think it's going to end up being prejudicial to both the defense and the state.
Let me ask you this. You, as part of your more active role in this investigation, you had would it be accurate to say that there were a number of MPD officers working under the primary investigator in this case, doing, I guess, line-level investigation? Would that be accurate to say?
There were several people involved in this investigation.
I mean, everyone from crime reduction unit members, to SRT members, to patrol officers. We're taking interviews of people, right?
Yes.
And ultimately, when you took an active role, a more active role, would it be fair to say that you had to, I guess, apprise yourself of the investigation or update yourself about the investigation at the point in time when you took a more active role?
Yes.
And I take it that as part of that full and fair investigation, you would have read police reports, and if any police reports had mentioned, for example, a suspect, a potential suspect, you would have followed up as the primary investigator. Would that be accurate?
Well, as I got involved into the case, I was doing more interviews at that time, so I wasn't reading other people's reports.
Well, let me ask you this. At some point, Detective Liu was the primary investigator, right?
Yes.
At some point, did you become the primary investigator?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what happens if an officer interviewing someone comes across a person of interest or a suspect during the switch-off between you two, Detective Liu and you? You're not going to say that that suspect falls through the cracks, right?
Well, if I can't say what another officer would do, but that officer should bring it to the attention of the primary investigator.
But what about you as the primary investigator? Do you have any responsibility for looking at the reports and making note of anything that pops up?
Well, I got to look at the reports as they're done. But at that time, I was doing interviews.
And on that note, you'd agree with me that you interviewed, for example, Drew Kaiser, right?
No, I didn't.
You read his interview, right?
I was made aware of it, but I didn't read it at that time.
I take it you must have read it as the primary investigator at some point.
Later on.
Okay, now, you'd agree with me that in that interview, Drew mentions...
Shut up, Judge.
Briefly-
This is hearsay.
It's not for the truth of the matter
It's pure
asserted.
hearsay.
It's for the information he
Let
knew
me
of
ask you
and didn't
this.
follow
Let me
up.
ask you this, okay?
May we approach, Your Honor, rather
Yes,
than doing some kind of...
that would be fine. I think that would be a good idea.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. May we speak on one more topic up there? I apologize. Sure.
You may answer your next question.
Like I said before, the more I flip through, the less questions, so bear with me. In reviewing your reports, did it come to your attention, or did you ever investigate who an Adam Hagee is?
I've never heard of.
Did you ever get a report? Did you ever read Officer Wicoli's report in becoming the primary investigator here?
Yeah, later on I did.
And did you ever notice him mentioning an Adam Hagee claiming to be Charlie Scott's father
Judge, objection.
at Jaws?
Objection, Your Honor, this is calls for hearsay.
All right, the objection is sustained. If you want to ask about a person by that name, that's fine, but the additional information is hearsay.
What follow-up did you do on Adam Hagee?
None.
If someone claimed to be Charlie Scott's father, and you knew that wasn't her father, would you have done further investigation?
Judge, objection, this calls for speculation, it's an improper hypothetical.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, when you reviewed Officer Wicoli's report, did you notice the context that Adam Hagee's name came in?
I believe Officer Wicoli.
Objection, without saying what it is, it's a yes or no response. I would ask that detective not be allowed to answer substantively.
It wouldn't be for the truth of the matter asserted, it's just for what's noted in the report.
Same
or follow-up.
objection is hearsay.
All right, the objection is sustained. If you can answer yes or no, you may. If not, then just let us know.
Sorry, what was the question?
Question is, when you reviewed Officer Wickley's report, did you notice the context that Adam Hagee's name came in?
That I can't answer that yes or no.
Did you, relative to the items of evidentiary value that were ultimately found on February 13, 2014 by Phaedra, Max, and Molly. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes, I do.
There was a sweatshirt in that, right?
Yes, there
Yeah,
was.
I do object on this council's ask. This is all speculation on the part of Detective Hamilton. He wasn't part of that.
I'll sustain the objection to the form of the question, but if you want to rephrase that question, you may.
Did you ever, in terms of your more active role in the investigation, would it be accurate to say that you were responsible in terms of what was sent out for testing and what wasn't?
Detective Liu was still, by the time that items went out, I was assisting Detective Liu by shipping those items out.
And when was that by? Or what date was that?
I believe that was in April those items went out.
Well, you agree with me that you had a more active role as of March of 2014, right?
Yes,
And that you assisted in the processing of evidence with Anthony Earls, right?
yes.
And that you coordinated the testing of evidence, right?
I believe,
No, objection, that is vague and ambiguous at this point.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
And that you had you did the decision-making as to whether evidence would go out for testing or not, right?
Objection
Or
again,
testing or
that's
not.
vague and ambiguous as to which
The
testing.
objection is sustained. The court has no problem with specific questions as to what he did or did not do. But please be more specific questions.
Well, you had decision-making power as to whether evidence would go out for testing, in this case, in general, as of March of 2014, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Again, it's vague and ambiguous as to which evidence was being referred to.
I'm talking about all the evidence, Your Honor, as of March.
I'm going to sustain the objection. I think you need to be specific.
Well, did you testify that you coordinated the testing of evidence?
Objection, that's a vague question, and that's not the testimony.
The objection is sustained.
Did you have any decision-making power over whether items were tested in this case or not after March of 2014?
I did.
Were those limited to specific items of evidence, or did you have that decision-making power over all of the evidence that was being contemplated for testing?
Detective Liu was still involved in this investigation, so we decided on what was going to go out.
And that's after March 2014?
Yes.
Well, you recall testifying on June 20th of 2016 at a hearing in this courtroom, don't you?
Yes.
Now, this is page 6. Isn't it true that when you were asked that question back then, you told the prosecutor you had decision-making as to whether the evidence would go out for testing or not, and that was all the evidence?
Well, it was, yes, I did have a say in what evidence went out.
Well, that's not what you said back in June 20th, right? You said that you were the person who made the decisions, right?
No, I was not just the only person involved in this.
So you're saying after March, Detective Liu had responsibility for sending things out?
Detective Liu still had a say in what was going on.
Let me ask you this. Did Detective Liu at all send anything at all out for testing?
No, he didn't.
You sent everything out for testing, right?
Yes, I did.
So why are you saying Detective Liu did so?
Judge, objection, that's not his testimony.
The objection is sustained. You may ask your next question.
And you would instruct Anthony Earls whether to send things, and how to send, or whether to send things or not, right?
Yes.
You became aware at some point that there was a sweatshirt found as evidence in this matter, right?
Yes, I was.
Did you send that sweatshirt out for testing?
Yes, it went up.
Okay, and you can associate that sweatshirt with the items of evidentiary value that was found on February 13, 2014 by Max, Molly, and Phaedra, right?
Yes.
And you also sent out some pants that were found from that incident, right?
Yes.
Now, would you agree with me that those items were, at least by appearance, new?
Judge, objection, Your Honor. This does go beyond the scope at this point. If he wants detective to
The
testify.
objection is sustained.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this. Were you ever informed of any jewelry being found out in Jaws?
Jewelry.
Your objection is calls for hearsay.
The
I'm an
objection is
investigator.
the objection is sustained.
In the course of your investigation, did you ever come across information that any of the Scott family members found jewelry at the scene of the burnt Forerunner at Jaws?
Same objection, Your Honor.
The
No
objection is
personal
sustained.
knowledge. Thank you.
Were you ever given information about a backpack being found in the Jaws area?
Same objection, Your Honor.
The objection is sustained.
It's not going for the truth of the matter asserted. It
Yeah,
goes-
I think I understand what you're trying to ask, and I think you need to rephrase your questions. And if you do so, I don't believe you'll draw an objection.
Let me come back to that. In terms of the people you interviewed, you testified you interviewed a number of people, right?
Yes.
Did you ever interview a Guillermo Torres?
Yes, I did.
Why did you do that?
He worked at Hanzawa's store.
And what was the purpose for interviewing him?
From what?
Judge, objection if this calls for hearsay.
I'm not sure why
It
you
would
answered.
appear to call for hearsay.
In terms of his reason for wanting to investigate. Maybe I can ask a question.
All right.
Would it be
The
accurate?
questions, we'll have the question withdrawn, if that's okay with you, and then you may rephrase the question.
Would it be accurate to say that in terms of your interview of Guillermo Torres, it was to determine a time frame of Charlie's action on the night of February 9, 2014?
Yes.
Did you successfully interview Guillermo Torres?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall interviewing Taylor Farner and Nick Omura?
Yes, I do.
Let me ask you this. How long is the walk from the CID interview room to the outside of the Wailuku police station?
Distance or time?
How about time?
30 seconds maybe?
How about distance?
100 feet?
While you were interviewing Nicholas Omuro, where was Taylor Farner?
She was waiting in the lobby area at the CID office.
Did you interview both of them prior to your recorded interviews individually with them?
I talked to him that day. Is that what you mean?
Correct. When you say you talked to them that day, what do you mean?
That's when I conducted the interviews with them.
Okay. Now, you interviewed Nick starting at 11:08. Well, let me ask you this. Did you talk to them before your recorded interviews of them?
I talked to each one of them.
And that was before they went into the CI or the interview room and was recorded?
Not together, because I talked to them each individually as I interviewed them.
And so your testimony is that you did not interview them before the recorded interview?
Are you asking if I interviewed them together or
Well, Matt, did you interview them together?
no?
Did you interview them separately?
Yes.
Before? And how was that done?
Well, I'm not sure. We went into the CID room and I interviewed them.
And that was the recorded part, right? I mean, was there an unrecorded interview of either one of those?
We talked before I took their statement.
Okay, and when would that have been?
That would have been in the CID interview room.
Like independently?
Yes.
As they came in one by one for their...
As one waited outside, I talked to the other one.
Okay, because would it be accurate to say that you started your interview with with Nick at 11:08? Would that be accurate? And if you don't know, looking at the report or that relevant part of the report, refresh your recollection?
Yes.
This is page 1. Can you approach it?
You may.
Are you asking about Nicholas or Taylor? Because you gave me Taylor's.
What time was that interview started?
It says 11:15.
Okay, let me bring you Nicholas and find your sources. Okay, you can have both up there. So would it be accurate to say that Nicholas was the first interview?
Yes.
And that would have started at
11:08.
11:08? Now, do you recall what time your interview with Nicholas ended?
No, I don't.
May I approach?
You may.
This would be page 3.
Page 3. Yeah, page 3 I have it here. Tracy.
It says it concluded at 11:12.
Okay, so your interview for Nicholas Amora goes from 11:08 to 11:12.
Yes.
And then what time does your interview with Taylor start, do you know?
At 11:15.
And so when does that pre-interview take place, for example, with Taylor?
I talked to her before.
Before you spoke with Nicholas?
Yes, because she's the one who told me about Nicholas.
So you had, oh, you mean on a prior date?
That's how I found out about Nicholas, was from a previous conversation with her.
But in terms of your pre-recorded, oh, I see, that's what you're saying, that's when you're saying your pre-recorded I'm sorry, did you have a pre-recorded interview with Taylor on the day, on that second interview date? What was it, the 20th?
The 10th?
Yeah, I do, this is a technical objection. I think it's confusing. You know, we went through this, the word pre-recorded. There's no such thing as a pre-recorded anything.
All right, well, it's clear that There's some confusion there concerning
Yeah. Thank you.
what you're asking, so.
Yeah, actually, let me just take that back. Move along. Detective, in terms of a review of the reports, as part of your role in this investigation, did you review the report of Officer John Sang?
I do remember reading that.
And would you agree with me that therein is another notation in terms of a suspicious person that's brought to your
There's
attention?
objection, Your Honor, that calls for hearsay. Especially
There's
at
nothing offered
description.
for the truth of the matter.
Same
sir.
objection.
The objection is sustained. If you want to ask whether he interviewed someone, I don't have a problem with that.
Let me ask you, did you follow up with any interviews having read Officer Sang's report?
No, I didn't.
No business.
Any redirect examination?
No, Your Honor.
Are there any juror questions?
Yes, sir.
All right, I could go. We'll have the jury go to the jury room. The record reflects the jury is no longer in the courtroom, and the witness is no longer in the courtroom. I have several jury question forms. First question, on the first form that has several questions. First question, can you clarify, was Wendell Liu the beginning primary investigator with this case, and you were the final primary investigator for this case? Mr. Rivera.
No objection.
Mr. Upwell.
No objection.
Next question, what happened to Wailuku not working on this case, Mr. Rivera?
Yeah, that calls for speculation.
Mr. Upwell.
Lack of foundation.
Sustained. Next question, did you interview all 10 persons of interest and/or suspects at Maui Police Department in an interview room, reading them all Miranda rights? Mr. Rivera.
You know, that calls for hearsay, I just can't really know the randomness.
No objection.
I'll allow the question. Next question. At what point did you take the lead as the primary investigator, Mr. Rivera?
No objection, if you can answer that.
Mr. Pope?
No objection.
This question will be asked. Next question. How many interviews did you do once you took on the case, on this case? Mr. Rivera?
No objection.
Mr. Upwell?
No objection.
Right, this question will be asked. Next question, who is Jeffrey Ellis? This is a next jury question form. First question, who is Jeffrey Ellis?
You know, that does call for hearsay.
Mr. Upwell.
I concur.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. Next question, please clarify the date that Stephen's room was searched and pictures from exhibits 380 to 381 were taken. Mr. Rivera.
No objection.
Mr. Upwell.
No objection.
This question will be asked. Next question. You noted there were few items in Stephen's closet in exhibit 381. Why was that significant to you, Mr. Rivera?
No objection.
Mr. Upwell.
Asking for a legal conclusion. Asking for an opinion. Relevance 403.
Sustained. Next jury question form, one question. Do you know the size of the blue jeans that was on the defendant's floor? Mr. Rivera?
No objection.
Mr. Upwell?
Lack of foundation.
I'll sustain the objection because, as I recall the testimony, you said he did not check or did not handle the jeans. Next jury question form, one question. Were the 10 persons of interest interviewed at the Maui Police Department interview room tape recorded interviews, and were their Miranda rights read to them?
You know, since the court's allowing two, I'll defer on that question.
Mr. Upwell?
No objection.
Okay. Seems almost identical to the...
The second or third question.
I'm just wondering if the same person wrote the question. You want me to ask both of these?
I'm satisfied with the second one. With the first question being asked, the second one isn't. The second time it's asked, it is implicit, isn't it?
That's fine.
All right, then we won't ask the first one, and we'll ask the one that I just read.
Either one, yeah.
That's the position of the parties.
Yes.
Eraser. Yeah, eraser. All right, next jury question form, one question. Being that the location was thick and woody, have you ever thought of using a metal detector, Mr. Rivera?
No objection.
Mr. Upwell?
Down the school.
I'll sustain the objection. All right, next question. Who is Jeffrey Ellis, and what significance does he have with this case, Mr. Rivera?
That does call for a hearsay.
Mr. Upwell?
Yeah, here's
All right, sustained. Last jury question form. First question, did you notice the size of the jeans that was on the floor, Mr. Rivera?
No objection.
Mr. Upwell?
speculative. Lack
Sustained. Next question, and a final question. Why was there a switch in roles? Why did you become the primary investigator, Mr. Rivera?
You know, that, they call for hearsay, so it's speculation.
Mr. Akakū?
Lack of foundation.
All right, sustained. We'll have the witness return to the courtroom. Do you have any? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, because the fine broke off, so.
Yeah.
If you can, well,
We just
I think we should be through the minute minutes here, so. Yeah. If you could already tell. Thanks. The record reflect the presence of the members of the jury. Our witness, who was outside while we were considering the questions, has now returned to the courtroom. You understand that you're still under oath?
Yes.
All right, I have some questions I'm going to read to you. After I read a question, I will tell you that you can answer the question. You can then face the jurors and answer the question. After you're through, if you would look back to me as you're doing right now, I'll take that as a signal that you're finished answering the question. I'll go on to the next question. After the last question, I'll see if the attorneys have any follow-up questions.
Okay.
If you would like me to read a question again, just let me know. I'll be happy to do that. All right?
Yes, sir.
First question reads, can you clarify, was Wendell Liu the beginning primary investigator with this case, and you the final primary investigator for this case? You may answer the question.
Yes, Wendell Liu did start the investigation, and as the time went on, he took less of a role in the case, and I took more of an active role. So there was no official, you're going to be the primary detective, and Detective Liu is no longer. It was just kind of, I took a more active role in the investigation, so you can kind of say that I did end up being the primary.
The next question reads, at what point did you take the lead as the primary investigator? You may answer the question.
Like I said before, it was kind of over a time period. I took more of an active role in the investigation than Detective Liu, probably sometime about mid to late March.
The next question reads, how many interviews did you do once you took on this case? You may answer the question.
I did about, I don't know the exact number, but between 30 and 40 interviews.
All right, the next question reads, please clarify the date that Steven's room was searched and pictures for exhibits 380 to 381 were taken. You may answer the question.
Those were taken on February 27th, 2014.
All right, the next question reads, were the 10 persons of interest interviewed at the Maui Police Department interview room tape recorded, interviewed, and were their Miranda rights read to them? You may answer the question.
Yes, they were interviewed at the Wailuku police station, and they were all Mirandized. Correction, one of them was interviewed at the Lahaina police station, but the rest of them were at the Wailuku police station.
All right. Any follow-up questions, Mr. Ricard?
May we approach her for just a second, because I think
All right.
that's the question.
So do you have any questions?
Your Honor, the state has no questions.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Mr. McCall?
I do, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Detective, would it be accurate to say that the designation of a primary investigator in a certain felony case is dictated by your general orders?
In the general orders, it does outline what a primary investigator is.
Now, does the general orders dictate that it's kind of a loosey-goosey thing when whoever feels like they're more active is the primary investigator, or does it dictate that somebody is determined to be the primary investigator?
Judge, I do object to that characterization that's argumentative.
The objection is sustained. You can rephrase the question.
Would you agree with me that the general orders dictate that a primary investigator be assigned to such a matter?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that in terms of your testimony that, somewhere in there, I just took more of an active role, that doesn't quite comply with the dictates of the general orders?
Judge, I do object to the tone of voice and the characterization of how Detective Hamilton did not answer that question. I object to the manner in which counsel characterized Detective Hamilton's response.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. You may rephrase your question if you wish.
Now, your testimony is that all of the people on the 10 list were Mirandized, right?
Yes, they were.
Now, is it your testimony that they were Mirandized, like, as soon as they came in because you wanted to warn them about those warnings coming into the interview?
Judge, objection. I make this also hearsay if we get further into that.
I'll sustain the objection.
So you can testify as to whether someone was Mirandized, just not when?
I think you asked for the
Yes,
reasons
for the
why, I guess, what the question is asking is the reason for each person being Mirandized.
Let me ask a different question. Is it your testimony that you Mirandized all these 10 people before you started your interview?
Yes.
What about Joshua Hyman? Did you Mirandize him right off the bat?
I can't tell you exactly when we Mirandized them.
Well, let me see if this plays out. You agree with me? Well, let me ask you this. Why was Joshua Hyman a person of interest? Or
Judge,
suspect?
objection. This calls for hearsay and
Yeah,
speculation.
the objection is sustained.
What was your purpose for bringing Joshua Hyman?
Again, this goes into 404 material that counsel did bring up prior.
The objection is sustained.
Detective, would you agree with me that in terms of at least Joshua Hyman, you didn't read him his Miranda rights to warn him about any incriminating statements or making of incriminating statements. You read him his Miranda rights to squeeze information
Judge,
out from
objection.
him.
This is highly improper. It's the reason. I'm sorry, it's argumentative.
I'll sustain the objection. You may rephrase your question if you wish.
Do you remember going into it what information you were trying to get from Joshua Hyman?
This is more than a yes or no answer, Your Honor, that calls for hearsay.
In terms of what
Well,
information?
I think he can answer the question yes or no if he remembers what information he was trying to get. Follow-up question may or may not be objectionable.
So the question is, you were asking if we were trying to get information from Joshua Hyman?
What information were you trying to get from
Oh,
Joshua
okay,
Hyman?
no, that's a different question.
That is a totally different question.
But
Let me ask you this. Did you bring Joshua Hyman in as a suspect in the case?
We brought him in as a person of interest.
Okay, why was he a person of interest?
Objection, Your Honor, we've been through this.
the objection is sustained.
Your Honor, quite frankly, I'd like to break now. I'd like the opportunity to have Joshua Hyman's transcript with me, which I don't have right now. If I can resume this line of questioning tomorrow,
All
I
right.
appreciate it.
That's fine. We'll adjourn for the day, ladies and gentlemen, and reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you so much for your service. Please keep in mind my cautionary instructions here remain in effect. Have a nice evening.